due to the fact that okay, yes, recording in progress. That's what we want. Okay, that basically gives the driver the opportunity to say, okay, if I don't have to cut the corn that short, I can save energy, I can save fuel, I can save costs. If I don't use the silage additives, if they're not used, if they don't need it, that also can save costs for myself. So this sensor already got its benefits when it's just working on the machine. But of course, as you know, the forage harvester, in many weeks of the year, it's only standing in the shed doing nothing. And just to give you an idea, these sensors are about 20,000 euros a piece. So wouldn't it be a smart solution if we could just take the sensor off the machine and put it, for example, on a slurry tanker by the company Zonama? And this is basically what you can do. If you got the sensor, you just need to take off 4 screws. So as you can see here, you only have to unplug this little thing right here, loosen these 4 screws, take the sensor off, go to your slurry tanker and put it back on right here so that you get the most effect for your investment. So Zonama, as you can see, they call this sensor van control, and they use it in a quite similar way. So for example, they use it on their implement tankers as well as their self-propelled machines, and they don't want to analyze the crop they're harvesting, they want to analyze the slurry that they are applying to the field. And this gives us the opportunity to say, okay, I know the field isn't always the same. And I know the slurry sometimes has higher levels of nitrogen and sometimes lower levels of nitrogen. And when it comes to mineral fertilizer, we are already able to work with application maps because we know the content, the nutritional value of the fertilizer. And this allows us to also be able to apply a specific amount of nutrient to a specific area in the field, even though we know that the nutrient content of the slurry might vary from cubic meter to cubic meter. And this can also be used because if you imagine there's a large pool of slurry sitting at your farm and you need to take a sample and send it via the post office to the laboratory. Then they do their chemical analysis and how many nutrients are in your slurry pool and send it back to you over days. You get the results a couple of days later. Then basically you could know, okay, in this pool, I've got this amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, and so on. But this is one sample really representative for these thousands of cubic meter of slurry. Could be questionable. If I take into consideration the moment I get these data, they are basically 4 days old. Has anything else happened in this chemical processes? Guys in the Zoom meeting, if you could mute your mics, that would be great. Thank you. So has anything happened over the last couple of days since I took the sample? Also quite questionable. So basically, they can also use this sensor as a stationary option so that they can go up to the pool and pump cubic meter after cubic meter through this sensor, that you really get a representative sample, that you really know how much nitrogen is in this pool of slurry. Or for example, if you have one sensor and 5 tankers, you can run all the slurry from the pool through the sensor into the tanker, and also it helps you and gives a very good understanding of how much nutrients you're actually applying to the field. Just to give you an idea how this process could look in the field. So we should have some sound to that as well. So we got this forager in the field working, and normally the quality check is done like this. When the corn is dropped off, you just take a handful, take a sniff, make sure all the corns are cracked. And with this sensor, you directly know in the field, okay, how many starch am I harvesting, how many protein is in my processed material. You can directly send it back to the farm. The farmer knows, okay, I didn't just harvest 800 tons. I directly know where I harvested that. And due to the yield potential of the field, I can then adapt my fertilizing. Because if I know this area of the field has a very high yield potential, I can make sure that I apply a little bit more nitrogen over there. and a little less on places where I know that the corn won't grow that high anyway. Okay, let's go to data transmission, because if you want to work with the data, you somehow need to get the data off the machine and into your office. You could do it by printing it out directly on the field with a printer. This is basically technology from several centuries ago. Some still do it. You could export it with USB sticks. And if you don't lose them, if you remember to export the data, if you don't step on your stick, if you remember to drop it off in the office, that might also work. But the state-of-the-art technology is to just transfer these data from the machines, from the Krone machine, from the Sunhammer machine directly in real time, directly into the office, so that these guys already know what you're doing. The problem with that was there wasn't really a standard in the industry to do that. So many companies say, hey, if you just buy machinery from us, just buy all your machinery from us, then you're completely fine, you're good to go. And this is what it looks like, because each company set up their own system and they say, hey, buy everything from us and you're fine. The problem is, now we're coming back to this argument of being a full liner. There have been some ideas to say, hey, if we just 2 or 3 companies, we join together and we just add some connections between our cloud ideas, our software ideas, then we should be fine. But yeah, these connections had a major flaw. If you take a look at the farms over the world, how do they actually operate? You barely find any farm that only has a machinery made by one supplier, due to the fact that, imagine you are a dairy farmer. You need a tractor, a slurry tanker, a feeder mixer wagon, some device for tillage, and some sprayer. You go to a large fair like the Agritechnica and ask all the brands, can you supply me with all this that I need? Most of them basically can't. And so in the end, even if they could, do you want all the machinery from one manufacturer? Do they really build all the material that you need? Or wouldn't basically the seeder from Lemken be a better choice than the seeder from John Deere? So basically, all the farmers end up using colorful fleets, and they need to be all connected to make use of all the data. And this is the approach that we had a couple of years ago. We just established one connection after the other between each manufacturer, and then we are good to go. That seems like a great idea, but the number of connections needed grew exponentially. Just to give you an idea, I will show you a couple of numbers in a minute, but the better idea was, let's establish one central, let's call it data roundabout, the so-called agri-router, and everyone needs to establish just one connection to the agri-router, and then we're all good to go. The major advantage of doing it like this was, if we take a look at the connections that we would need to be able to just get all the machines and all the apps working together. If we do it with the agri-router, and for example, we want to connect 250 companies, we would need 250 connections. If we do it without the agri-router, and everybody needs to basically set up individual connections from their machine to this app and this app and this app, we would need more than 30,000 connections to make sure that this is completely working. And of course, as the smart farming world keeps on growing, this number would have to keep on growing, and establishing more than 100,000 individual software connections is just not the way to go. So in the end, if we have connected the data, and the operation could look like this. So now that we are also able to transmit the data, what we want to do is apply the fertilizer in the most efficient way. Again, we have the van control sensor mounted on the machine. We take on the slurry at the farm, and we can directly select, please apply the slurry based on nitrogen in this case. And now we see here in the software, we get the information of the yield potential for the field, and we can set up the application map. So where do we want to set up how much of nitrogen on the field? We send it via the agri-router directly to the machine in real time. There the farmer can now activate the application map and just drive along the field. And the sensor in combination with the application map, as you can see right here, will make sure that every single square meter of agricultural land gets the amount of nitrogens that it needs. And then it can send back all the information of what they've been doing to the office, just to make sure that all the documentation is done up to speed. And of course, that in the end, when the harvester comes, we can really make sure that we see, okay, we did this very area specific, fertilizing, spraying, seeding. Did this have any effect at all? So, and now that we have created the data and we are able to transport this data from the machine to the office to other machines as well, now we want to talk about the possibilities, how we can use the data. The easiest way, especially for Krone, would be just to use our in-house software, the Krone Smart Telematics tools, that basically gives you an overview of where your machines have been working, and you get the information, how much corn did we harvest, how high was the starch, the protein content, the ADF, NDF content. This basically gives you an overview of all the things that you harvest. So for example, if you are a farmer and you want to sell your corn, and you think, I did a very good job, the price for my corn per ton should be higher than the price for the corn of my neighbor, because I know I have higher nutritional value in my plants. And you can then go and give the person that you're selling your corn to this printout and prove that, yeah, my corn really has higher nutritional value. It has a higher market value, and therefore you should pay me more per ton than my neighbor that basically can sell you a bunch of harvested biological material, but you don't really know what's inside that. So this is where then you can actually get higher prices for your harvest than you could otherwise, because you can directly say, okay, I can show you why my corn is higher value than the other corn. And of course, if we export the data to another software, this is an example out of the Next Machine Management, you get this yield map as well. Of course, you can check again, okay, where was the yield a little bit higher, where was the yield a little bit lower? And then by pressing a couple of buttons, you can then transform these informations to a so-called yield map, and you can combine this yield map with the yield map of the other years from your combine harvester, from your potato harvester, from your sugar beet harvester. You can combine it with a leaf area index made by satellite pictures. You can combine it with the maps of different soil types that you might have in your field. And if you take all these information together, you can get a pretty good indication where on this field you maybe in the next year want to apply a little bit more seeds and fertilizer and all that good stuff. And where, for example, you might want to apply a little bit less of these ingredients, just on the one hand to make sure you save money by not putting too much seed in the ground. You don't fertilize in places where the plants don't have a chance to just take up all the nutrients in. And because the maximum amount of nutrients for this field is limited, you want to make sure that the amount of nutrients that you are allowed to put on this field is put to work in a place where you can get the most yield out of it. So just basically, this is the next step of being good, practical in agricultural arable farming. And of course, many machines from back in the day, they would also be able to do that. You would need a farmer that starts here and sets up the drill in a specific way, then stops here and sets up the drill another way, moves on, stops here again, sets the drill up in the next way. Technically, it's possible, but nobody would really do it in the field. And of course, on small arable farms, the farmer knows, okay, I know my field. I've been working this in the 7th generation now. I don't need all these maps. But due to the fact that the structures in agriculture are changing right now in many parts of the world, and you got these very large farms, which also work with different contracting businesses, the person operating in the field might not be the one that has been operating there for several generations. So they might do not have this great understanding of the types of soil in the field. And if you can supply these people with these types of information that we see right here, they can work just as well as a farmer that has been working there for the last 80 years. Of course, here as well, you can print your entire knowledge out just to make sure you can use it as an argument. If you're selling your crops, you can directly show, okay, my crops have higher quality. These are data that is certified by the DLG, so I know what I'm doing. And of course, those were examples from the forage harvester. The same goes, of course, as well for the slurry tanker. As we can see here, we can see all the levels of the different types of fertilizer, of nutritional value that we put on the field, just to give us a perfectly automated documentation. Because as many of you, I'm quite sure, know, there's nothing that farmers like more than working their ass off all day and then in the evening sit down in the office and do office work for another 4 hours. So most people that go into agriculture, they want to work in the field, they want to work with animals. They don't want to sit on a desk all day. And by applying these smart farming measures, you are able to just do the documentation automatically while you're on the run. So in the evening, you can just sit down, take a quick look, okay, all the things I've done today, all the documentation has already been transferred automatically from the machine into the software. I just can take one quick look. Yeah, that looks like what I've been doing these days. Just click on accept and you did all your documentations with a single click instead of taking on the piece of paper from the machine, going back to your office, open your app for documentation and by hand transferring all the data, maybe mix some of these data up. This is no longer state of the art. So we do have all the technical means that we need to just take these types of tasks away from the farmer and enable them to spend more time in the field looking after their crops and spend more time with their animals looking after them, just like most of them intended when they actually joined the agricultural industry. Of course, printouts are possible here as well. So for this speech, of course, we couldn't get into all the different types and all the different processes that smart farming has to offer. But therefore, I would like to finish with an invitation. If you are around at the 27th and 28th of April, there will be the so-called Smart Farming Days close to Osnabrück. It's an event free of charge, basically, and around 40 companies, so the manufacturers of machinery and, of course, the suppliers of agricultural software will come together at Gut Ahrensthorst, which is a little bit northeast to Osnabrück. It's completely free of charge. You can just register on smartfarmingdays.com. I think around 300 tickets are still available. And basically, we will have all these machines that you've seen and many more directly on site so that we can show you all the features directly on the machines. We will have all the different softwares directly on site. So if you think, okay, smart farming seems to be an interesting topic, I'd like to know more. Or maybe I don't know what the guy has been talking about for the last 20 minutes. I really have to cross-check that. That could also be an argument. So if you guys are around, I would be glad to see you at the Smart Farming Days. Okay, and this is what I wanted to talk to you guys about. If you have any questions, feel free. That's what I'm here for. So if you set up your own AgriRouter account, I just get back to the graphic real quick. So basically what you're doing, you set up your own AgriRouter account. So basically this is your own digital roundabout, let's call it that. And then you just connect your machinery and your app, and Krone is completely out of the picture. So this is your roundabout. You connect your machinery, you connect your app, and then the data goes through this connection, through your roundabout into your software. So doing it this way, Krone is completely out of the picture. We do offer our own software if you want to use that. So if you say AgriRouter, that sounds like great idea. I don't want anyone to interfere with my data. Okay, good, perfectly well argued. We do also offer our own software, and these get stored on Krone servers. I'm going to be honest, but if you say, okay, I go AgriRouter, I connect my Krone machine, send the data through the AgriRouter, and use the software of my choosing, next machine management, AgForce, Farming Fox, you name it, then Krone is completely out of the picture. So your data stays your data. You paid for the sensor, you bought the machine, you created the data, it's yours. Why should anyone else be able to work with that?
How much do these machines cost?
Of course, it's a large field from the small mower to the big forage harvester, but I think let's go with the top number. If you say, I want to go with the, I think this was the slide, sorry, one too early. So yeah, it starts at, the cheapest ones would be these small rakes, tedders, and mowers, but let's say go big or go home. If you say, I want the big forage harvester, 1200 horsepower, I want the header for grass, I want the header for corn, I want the header for whole crop silage, then you are talking around about €500,000 as a list price. But of course, this is the top end. We also have on our website a complete configurator where you can basically check out every price for every single machine, every single option available. So yeah, you can just basically browse that in the evening and check out prices for round balers, square balers, rakes, tedders, mowers, everything that you're interested in. You're welcome. So basically, you can go to the homepage my-agrirouter.com and set up your own AgriRouter account completely for.
What was that?
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for some of you. Yeah, we are very pleased to be here as Wageningen University, that we are invited at the International Conference for Youth in Agriculture by IAS, the International Association of Agricultural Students. In fact, we are already working together with IAS for several years. I hope you see the my right screen. Dirk, can you answer me, please? Aha. Okay, yeah, because I saw something else. Sorry, this is just a Zoom and the older generation, I think. I'm sorry. Yeah, we are already teaming up with IAS for 2 years in organizing challenges together with Wageningen University. Last year, we organized the King Innovation Track on climate adaptation and food systems. This year, we are launching the Nature-Based Solutions Challenge. And so happy that youth networks are joining us, amongst others IAS, but also you can see it on the screen. We are working together with the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, CGIAR, with Youth in Landscapes, YIL, the Dutch Youth Council, and the Future for Nature Academy. At the left side of my screen, you see two companies, two Dutch engineering companies, Arcadis and Witteveen and Bos. And they will be our sponsoring and coaching partners in the Nature-Based Solutions Challenge. Yeah, so once again, we are happy to be here. I'm here, Dirk, maybe you can see him. I see him in my screen. Maybe you can also see him. He's from Wageningen University. He will give you a presentation later. My name is Mirjan. I worked for Wageningen University, but I was also a very active IAS member during my studies. And so it's with much pleasure that I'm here now to give a presentation to you. There will be also other guests here, and not only IAS members, so also a warm welcome to maybe companies that are joining because they are interested in the nature-based solutions. Yeah, what are we going to do in this 45 minutes? I will start with some explanation on the challenge. And after my presentation, we will go to Dirk van Apeldoorn. He will give a presentation on nature-based solutions in future cropping system. That's very much in line with your conference at the moment. And afterwards, yeah, there's time for questions. In the meantime, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat already. We try to answer them during the webinar, but also afterwards, we will pick some out. So the nature-based solutions challenge, what is it all about? It's, well, nature-based solutions, you will hear more in Dirk van Apeldoorn's lecture about it. If you want to join the challenge, you will think of a problem in your own area or in another area, but it should be like a plot that is physical, that is not big maybe because it's project, it's on project based. You address a problem and you contribute to climate, biodiversity and society. And to help you with that, we are organizing several webinars. This one is one of them, but we already organized also a webinar on human and wildlife coexistence in nature and nature-based solutions. You can go to our website. I will put it in the chat later to see more information about it and to get even more inspired in different topics. You can participate in the student challenge with 2 to 5 students, with maximum 1 recent graduate. So there could be a PhD among, but only one. The nice thing about this challenge, I think, is that we will pick 8 teams that will start working from the 10th of May. And they will receive immediately €2,500 plus mentoring from experts. So we really expect you to either build something that we can see or organize an event to tell the people that live in that neighborhood about nature-based solutions and ways to implement them. We did that last year. I don't know if people from the teams of last year are watching in the King Innovation track. There was a team who built a hydro pan and installed a dripping system and made a program for farmers. So it was like a pilot next to the University of Lithuania. If you are here, welcome. You can put it in the chat if you participated last year and are enthusiastic about it. How can you participate? You have to download a format for a concept note from our website. We will also send next week the recording of this webinar to all of you and the format by email, so you can see that there. Don't send in any other documents because we will not accept them. In the format, you can see how you can write down the why, what, and how of your projects. Of course, we will provide, if you are selected, you are provided with €2,500. So we want to see also budget, a timeline, and a team picture, please, because it's always good to be a little bit more personal and to see what's going on. We will have a panel of experts to select the teams, and you can also read everything back on the website. It's just this is an important point that we will. I want to highlight it. We will look at the impact of your nature-based solutions projects. We will look at the feasibility of your project, the scalability. So it doesn't have to be big right now, but it should have some potential to roll it out to other countries, to other areas. And last but not least, it should be in line with the 4 guiding principles to enable nature-based solutions to provide sustainable benefits to society. I will put a link in the chat later on to the link to that article. The time path. We had our kickoff event actually already the 22nd of February. That was a webinar with Tim van Hattem. he has prepared a map for the Netherlands in 100 years. We apply nature-based solutions, so it's very visual. And yeah, according to that map, you can visualize, okay, how would my area look in 100 years? And how can we go that way? How do we get politics involved? How do we get government, yeah, well, government politics? How do we get companies involved? How do we get youth involved, etc.? So he gave a webinar about that. It's recorded, and you can look at our website. On the 20th, we have a webinar today of Dirk van Apeldoorn, and the 23rd of March, we have another webinar by Youth in Landscapes. So welcome also to join that. We will put that in our email. The 13th of April is our deadline for submitting the concept notes. And the 10th of May, we have the final selection of the 8 teams that will receive the funding and the coaching. And then all the work starts, of course. In September, there are the finals for the 8 teams. And we are working towards the COP27, the climate summit in Egypt in November. We want to see if we can get the winning team at least involved in the COP27. Yeah, so this is it. If you have any questions, put it in the chat. I will answer them during the webinar and also afterwards. So I want to give the floor to Dirk van Apeldoorn, my colleague at Wageningen University, and he will give a presentation on nature-based solutions in future cropping systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirjan. Let me share my screen. Where's the good one? This one. Yes, I think this is the proper one for you to see. Can you confirm, Mirjan?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for this invitation. I was happy to get this invitation because 20 years back, I also was a member of IAS. It's also always nice to get an invitation from the past, you might say. But now, today, we're going to talk about the future. And I'm working in the Netherlands, so a lot of my examples will be about Dutch examples, but I hope that I can inspire you worldwide on what we did in the Netherlands. So why am I working with farmers and with biodiversity? And that's basically that I have kids, and my kids are about 10 years old. And when I was 10 years old, I was living in a rural area, and all my neighbors were farmers. And if I now go back to that same area to visit my parents, there are no farmers left. So we lost 2/3 of our farmers in the Netherlands in only 30 years of time. At the same moment, we lost 2/3 of our biodiversity in that area. So all the joy that I experienced while being in a rural area, all the nice butterfly, the birds, that's just gone. It's not there anymore. And when I realized that, I became very sad. So my motivation is to bend the curve so that we have more farmers in the Netherlands and we can again enjoy the countryside. Nevertheless, that will be a difficult challenge. And so if we see the Earth as a spaceship that we are on together all, then we would all kinds of warning signals, lots of red lights that will be beeping, basically. We are in trouble. And if you look what's causing the problems, then agriculture is one that causes the biggest problems. And the stupid thing for me is that we think, yes, maybe we have to cause this danger because we have to feed the world. But if you look at what we actually produce, it's not good for us. This study was done by scientists that collected all available information about healthy diets. And they said, okay, if we would eat these ingredients at 100%, then we all can get 100 years old. So that would be super healthy. But then what you see is that we produce a lot of animal protein and the starchy vegetables and all things of basically, you might say, the green revolution. And we're missing a lot of fruit, legumes, and nuts, etc. So we are killing our planet and ourselves. So that seems it seems stupid. And also that if you realize that about 70% of the global land use is about producing animal protein. So we really have to rethink what role agriculture has. So also I saw the previous part of the previous talk. So we are not in an easy time. Many demands are being made to agriculture. And also we see a lot of conflicts for agriculture, so that farmers don't know what to do. And that's basically, we cannot change the current agriculture by just optimization, and we need something big to change. We cannot continue with the current model. We need new models, and that will be your challenge. So what kind of new solutions are out there? So we are in this experiment phase. So and we are causing some chaos. We don't know yet where it will go to, but it's clear that the old way of doing is not an option anymore. And I will introduce you on a nature-based solution, and that's the concept of diversity. And why I say that this is a potential solution, because there is enormous amount of evidence that diversity works for many ecosystem services. So the problems that I said, okay, we have on the globe can be solved by diversity. There's a lot of evidence to do so, but there's not a single solution. And so we don't have any silver bullet. If we do this, then everything will work out. So we know that a solution that works in the Netherlands is not suitable for Africa or whatsoever. So we always need to be context specific. And also we see that there's a lot of variation. So if you look at profitability, that's something that you might say that's most important. Then yes, on average, diversity will increase your profitability. But we also see in this graph that there is a potential that's way below zero. That means that it's a negative effect. You can also get make more loss. But on the other hand, there's the bump you see here, that it's also possible to have a much higher profit. So it depends what kind of design you make and where you are to reach this. But important message is, it's not only about profitability or yield or whatsoever, and there's much more that we can gain with diversity. So how does diversity work? And this is based on proper ecology. So at the moment, agriculture is able to reach very high yields if you supply a lot of fertilizers, you plow the field, you use pesticides, for example. Basically, what we do is we reduce variation so that it perfectly fits one species of plant. But if you think about natural systems, there's a lot of variation in it. So that's a very environmental gradient. And if we would be able to put the right plant at the right position at the right moment, then we can basically make use of this variation, and you don't need that much of inputs to get still this high yield. So that's basically what we see with it. When you have multiple species of plant in your system, you can still get high yields without the need of inputs. Yield is only one ecosystem service that we're interested in. But the nice thing is that there's not necessarily a trade-off. So you can have yield, but gain about 5% of yield. But I have to admit, this also makes it more difficult. If you start mixing 5 different cultivars, then you might end up that they are not ripening at the same moment. So you get a problem with birds that will start eating your crop while it's not completely ready yet. So there's a trade-off there to, well, what can you design and what do you leave to natural variation? If you start mixing different crops, I want to point attention to legumes. Legumes have many ecosystem services that they can provide. This is a study that we did on what kind of ecosystem services are produced by different legumes and how much they are studied by science. And then you see, yes, we know a lot about this lower left corner. Very few legumes, but actually there are much more. And there are much more ecosystem services that are available. But if you look in this right corner, we are basically in terra incognita. We don't know what the effect will be of using this other legumes and what kind of services they will offer. But I'm pretty sure that they can also increase ecosystem services, because legumes are just amazing what they can do. So we go one step further to more complex use of genes, and that is the use of agroforestry. You can imagine that the tree is pretty much different as a cabbage, as you see in this picture. So you have more different genes in it, so you get a more complex set of genetic diversity in your system. And now go to the other dimension of time. So you can have very simple temporal diversity, you might say, from a crop rotation, the use of cover crops, to relay cropping. And what that is, I will explain you. So we use, again, a lot of scientific data that's available, and we checked if, when we started intercropping, if the crops were sown at the same moment or if they were sown at different moments and harvested. So that's what we call temporal niche differentiation. And an example that you might know is what you see here is the use of white clover in cereals. And basically, after the last time of harrowing or of weeding, you just broadcast the clover seeds, and they will remain low till the wheat is harvested, and then you have a clover sward ready for example, grazing or mowing. And you can do that for many other crops, and the more you are able to pull them out in time, the higher your yield benefit will be. Here you see in this graph, if you just sow them at the same moment, on average you have an 18% increase. If you are able to and distinguish them almost completely to one here, you get up to, I think in this graph, it's a 30% yield increase. And so there's a benefit of separating it over time. Of course, if you're not in the tropics, but in the more temperate regions, so we cannot grow crops during winter. You can use cover crops. So after your main yield, your main crop, you can use cover crops. You see a nice picture here at the back of this graph. And if you start using cover crops, your carbon sequestration increases. And if you start using mixtures of cover crops, it increases even more. So here we see the benefit of diversity, and especially so if you use this mixture after your normal crop, you can see that you increase your genetic diversity as well enormously. And so here you see already that you can combine different dimensions. So if we think about the long time, so how do you manage your crops? Maybe you know the importance of having a wide crop rotation, so not growing every year the same crop. And that's, for example, important for combating weeds. What we see, if we use all the scientific literature again, is that the number of wheat plants decreases if you have a more diverse crop rotation. On the other hand, the wheat biomass does not necessarily decrease. That's also, if you think about an ecological way of thinking, if there is light, if there are nutrients, then yeah, just the wheat will just grow, will develop its biomass. But another nice thing of having a wide crop rotation is that the number of different species increase of wheat, and you would think, okay, why does that matter to have different wheats? The more different wheats, a wheat is a wheat, I don't want it. But if you have more different wheats, then the chance that the wheat will be very competitive or negative for your crop also becomes smaller. So you will have less yield loss, for example, and you even get benefits because this wheats, they offer all kinds of ecosystem services. So you get intercropping for free, you might say. And now we go to the third dimension of space, going from semi-natural habitats to strip cropping to pixel cropping, different skill related to it. So maybe you know the use of field margins of flower strips, as you see here. They are very beneficial for pollination or for pest control. And many farms in the Netherlands have been experimenting with this. But what we now know is actually that, yes, they look nice. And if you are measuring in the flower strip, then you will see an enormous amount of insects. But this effect on the crop decreases exponentially with the distance to it. So this effect is only marginal, you might say. If you use these strips not at the edges of your field, but really in your field, then you, of course, you have a double effect. And here you see another example of using space. Let's see if and that is social distancing with crops. Here we had a farmer that has problems with potato late blight, devastating in organic potato production. And what he did, he mixed 2 different varieties of potatoes just in strips of 6 meters. And one variety is very susceptible to late blight and the other one is not. And you can see the different varieties here by the flowering. But what he did actually with this is that the vulnerable potato plant could not infect the other one. So also what we did during the COVID times, and that you just are putting distance to susceptible people, or in this case susceptible plants, then they cannot infect the other one. And the animation that you saw is basically what the effect of the infestation is. And so you really see that you have a longer time before you have to destroy your crop. So these are just 3 dimensions, but of course, maybe as all students, you are thinking it, okay, I can combine it. And here you get a complex 3D cube that has all kinds of different farming practices in the 3 dimensions. And let me just give you a few examples of some of these practices. So you can use strip cropping and you can start mixing cultivars. And that's what we did here in the Netherlands. So we looked into potato late blight, and you see in the reference this very classical exponential growth of the disease. And this dotted line you see here is basically when we are legally forced to kill the crop, so to stop the growing season. So when it got infected in the reference crop, already after 4 days, we had to kill the crop. If you would do that in 6 meter wide strips, we gain 2 extra days. You say, okay, what are 2 extra days? But potato plants grow about 800 kilograms per hectare per day, and when they are fully covered. So that is already quite substantial for the farmer. But if the farmer would go to 3 meter wide strips, he gains, or she, I maybe should say, gains 11 days. But if you start mixing different cultivars of potatoes, then you can go to 16 or even 21 days. So here you see the effect of stacking different practices. And of course, you might think, I cannot sell my different varieties of potatoes if they are mixed in the row. That has to do on how we currently harvest them. So we have a row harvester, so that cannot be easily separated. But on the other hand, if you have an optic sorting machine, then it becomes very easy. If the potatoes have different colors, then we can separate it. So there are, if you think about the future, there are certainly technologies out there to make this possible. Another extreme form of intercropping is that we are trying is really based on how would nature look like. And there we have on every 50 by 50 centimeter, we have a different crop. So here you see cabbages and cereals and clover and potatoes and leek all growing in a big mixture all together to see what would happen with this kind of system. How would it respond? And my PhD student, Stella, investigated that, and what she saw, she could compare it to 4 different cropping systems in the Netherlands, and she checked how much crop diversity was there. So we have here monoculture, and you have on average a 6% damage of the leaves, but with every step of crop diversity, the amount of damage decreases with 10%. So here you see that if you have 11 different crops or varieties in your field, we had more than halved the damage. So nature is basically controlling it. The important message is though is that you don't get at a 0 level of crop damage. Yeah? With nature-based solutions, you have to allow nature to do some damage before it can control it. Current production with no damage is not possible with natural control, basically. Or if you want to stack things, here's a farmer that is doing strip cropping, but he also wanted to have his cows in the strip. So here you see cows grazing in small strips and really putting, according to him, and more energy to his production. At least it's giving him much more joy in the field. Here, an example from the tropics that some of you might know, and which is an inspiration for me, that is in tropic farming. And here the farmer is basically using the succession of ecosystems to build up natural capital. So we are not aiming at a stable state, but you're trying to increase your natural capital, and then you can start a new succession. And so that's what you see here. So building up, building up, building up, and here you start a new system, but that is only possible once you have built up the natural capital. So your topic is designing for diversity, and here you see an example of what we did in the Netherlands. It's near the city of Almere and near the highway. And here we used strip cropping, and it's also an experiment, so you still see some big fields in it. But what is actually important in your design is that it's attractive and to get people enthusiastic about it. So there are very good solutions of zero tillage for your soil, etc. But that's very hard to explain to the public. So make sure that your design is attractive and that it's also that people can understand it. So we put it in between the highway and the city so that many consumers could actually see how their food is produced. And then you have a story to sell, I can almost say. If you start designing, you have to really think carefully, why do you want to mix what? This is work based on a meta-analysis. And here we said, okay, what kind of combinations work well for cabbages? And again, we use all the scientific literature available. And then we found out that bulbs, or onions, you might say, they are a very good neighbor for cabbages. You get a higher yield. So that seems good. And if you start mixing it with living mulches like clover, you get a decrease in yield. However, if you want to have a nice product that you can sell at the market with not so much damage, for example, and a nice size, then the living mulches are the best combination that you can make. And if you want to reduce your pests, then again, either living mulches or the onions are good. So it's really important to think, okay, what is my problem and what's my objective for combining species? And it's not only the objective, but also where you are. So if you are a conventional farmer and you want to go into intercropping, then you will probably see a decrease in productivity because conventional farmers have become very good in producing crops as well, especially I can say for Europe. So farmers are world champion in growing crops and controlling everything. But if you want to allow some natural processes, like in organic farming, then you really have to use diversity, at least that's in my opinion. So that's important to keep in mind. Okay, in what kind of context will I work? And if you are in organic farming or with low inputs, then definitely diversity works. So let's now think about future farming systems. So in the past, technology determined how we should grow plants. And so technology was in charge. We have been growing plants in rows for ages already, just because we started with a plow. And then it's very easy to grow plants in lines. And also big fields, for example. And it's all based on technology rather than on what a plant wants. But if you want to make use of nature-based solutions on nature, then you have to think, okay, actually, how does a plant wants to grow? What kind of ecology does it need? So let's let ecology inform agronomy rather than technology. And of course, this ecology can inspire technological solutions. So what kind of techniques do we need? And then this technology can facilitate the interaction between ecology and agronomy. So it's not leading anymore, but facilitating the growth of healthy crops. So if we think about the role of technology, we come from big fields where machines were the boss. So this is a typical machine of a sugar beet harvester, very big, and it's only coming to your field when you have big fields, because otherwise it's too expensive to get there. And also it only makes it profitable if you have a few different crops, because then you can invest in this very expensive machine. So it's basically encouraging specialization. You can go to strip cropping where we make use of space, you might say, and that one machine can use the other strip. Here you see an example where we harvest the potatoes, where the heavy machine with the keeper is driving over a grass strip. The grass strip is very supportive for the heavy machine. You have no soil damage, so you are saving your soil. But if we look to future systems, you might think of this kind of autonomous small-scale systems that can really manage plant by plant and don't need big fields of the same anymore. And the stupid thing for me is, so this robot that you see here was developed for monocultures, but if we really tap into the creativity, what new technology can do, then we can work with these high diversity systems. And now it's up to you. I found this very shocking. This was recently published in Science, and I guess and this is about how much the temperature will increase with climate change will be expected, and what the chances will be that you will experience heat waves of crop failures or etc. And I am from the 80s, so even if we just increase 1.5 degrees, I will have 2 to 3 crop failures. But you, the young population, my guess is about in 2000, it's pretty certain there will be major events, drastic events. So we really need new solutions. So please come up with good solutions. We need you. Finalizing, thinking about nature, natural systems are diverse. Diversity can be used in agriculture. The management of diversity requires smart design. and your technology that you want to use should be supportive rather than leading your design. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dirk. That was really interesting. And I saw also a comment in the chat already, really good slides, top presentation, and I second that. Yeah, so it's time for questions now. You can either ask questions to Dirk or to me about the challenge. And so far, I didn't see a question, but you have some time. There was a question if you can share the slides afterwards, Dirk. You agree with that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then I will send it with the mailing in the beginning of next week. Yeah, maybe to start with the questions, I was really wondering, Dirk, just imagine you are still a student at Wageningen University or at Bonn or wherever, and if you wanted to participate in a nature-based solutions challenge with a team of 5 students, and you will have to make up a project and you get 2,500 euros and a mentor from either Arcadius or Witteveen and Bos, what do you already have an idea on what you would want to do with in the project?
What I would do is, well, depending on where you are in the globe, of course, and start thinking, okay, actually, what should be produced? So if you think, okay, about a healthy diet, for example, or if you want to go into more circular systems, okay, what kind of biomass do I need for construction or for energy, etc. So make sure that multiple functions are met. So single solution, well, that's not nature-based. If you have a single solution for one problem, try to think multifunctional, and that one element is supportive to the next element. And so you can do that with crops or with animals, whatever. So that would be my suggestion. And so start stacking these functions or also these elements. And that's, yeah, well, for me, very interesting, but also I think for you, the exciting part of designing, that you can see, okay, that makes all the different elements work.
Okay, thank you so much. In the meantime, I see a question popping up. Thanks, Dirk, for the clear scenarios. How could we overcome the national policy bottleneck? It's a question from Sakir. I don't know which country. Sakir, can you put in the chat from which country you are? But maybe, Dirk, can you say anything about it?
And I have to admit that national policies are still focused on monocultures, on simplicity. So if farmers want to start with diversity, they face all kinds of problems with registration and legislation. So sometimes, yeah, you can start mixing without telling them. So that some farmers start doing that. They started the mixed cropping of cereals, and they just told the government, okay, we used cereals, and they didn't tell that they were doing it. But on the other hand, you want to be, of course, acknowledged of doing it. And I think we have a good story. And policymakers are, in general, they like good stories. And especially if you have multifunctionality and you engage with the public, then a lot more is possible than if you just stick to the rules. So probably you will get an exception, and then you start, yeah, it starts rolling. We only started with this work in 2010 with the very first experiments, and now we have 50 farmers practicing it and government pushing it a lot. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I see that Sakir is from Bangladesh, and also he studied at Wageningen University, so good to have some alumni here also. Yeah, it's a different situation, of course, in Bangladesh. So happy if you can also share some info if you have, Sakir, in the chat. There is a question from Brazil, from Gabriela. Here in Brazil, this approach will be easily bought because students still don't believe agroecology. Okay. But this we heard today in this presentation, they will believe. Okay, so it's an inspiration to you in Brazil. That's also the idea of these webinars, that we inspire you, and also, but it's also interactive. So please, if you have remarks from Brazil, put them in the chat. Yeah, and it's also Laguna Blanca, I think that's in Argentina, and they use also strip cropping, and so it is possible. And so the nice thing is, with proper design, it doesn't take more time. So you still can work efficiently. It's not going back to the old times with the machinery, but making smart use of machinery.
In fact, yesterday we also organized a webinar from Verse Student Challenges on pixel farming, a company in the Netherlands. There should be a recording. Maybe I can also add that to the email next week.
Yeah, they are really people that aren't into the future working with technology, and also a new role for agriculture.
So there's like a campus in the Netherlands where they apply the pixel farming. So it's really on very small plots with consumers. So there's a whole system around it, but they are preparing machinery for those plots. So I will send you the link. It's they have a challenge also for students actually to build these robots and really apply things on a very small scale.
Yeah,
so,
I also would argue to read the paper that I had on the new role for technology. So it doesn't need to be a robot. So really think about agroecology and what kind of technology is needed. It's not only artificial intelligence, etc.
Okay, thanks for the addition. Yeah, if we can put a link in the email also. So we will prepare that next week. So yeah, I guess it's time. It's 9:47 in the Netherlands. I want to thank Dirk for his presentation, and I think everybody enjoyed it and learned a lot, and also myself. I want to encourage all students to apply for the Nature-Based Solutions Challenge, and I'm looking forward to see all your proposals. And IAS, thank you so much for having us at your International Conference for Youth in Agriculture. And well, see you next time.
Sorry, Dirk, can I ask a question to you?
Oh, I don't know if Dirk is still here.
Yeah, I don't know.
I am still here.
Okay,
I'm not sure if there's time. For me, it's okay, but I don't know for the
so we
project.
have a little bit of after time. I think at 10 the program of IA starts again. Or there's even a break. So yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is, you say that if you are using a conventional agriculture like intercropping and increasing biodiversity will probably decrease the productivity. So I come from Italy and I studying also in Wageningen. So how can we convince like farmers to change their system? Because we cannot expect that they just want to save the world and therefore they will lose their income because it's already low, the income of agriculture. So.
Yeah, so I hear that a lot, so that we are already in problems, so why should we change? But the world will change for them, and we cannot continue on what we have been doing. And so you're in Italy, so it's the same European rules. A lot of the pesticides that they are currently using will be banned, and so they cannot use it anymore. So if you then still want to grow crops, you need to do it differently. We cannot expect that chemistry will save us in that respect, and we have to trust nature. And so they have to change anyway, and it offers, I think, an opportunity for farmers. And so I was giving a course yesterday to farmers, and the first reaction to many farmers is yes, but I think that if you start doing something new, also new opportunities arise, and that we see actually with some farmers that started changing that they have new market opportunities and they have a secure future rather than going down. And so they have bent this curve, at least for themselves, that they can give the farm to the next generation. Does it answer your question, Gabriel? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now we are still here. There's also a question of Marius. It's in the chat, but I also see Marius on screen. So if you want to speak up, that's also fine, Marius.
Have you read it, Dirk? Right.
Yeah, I've read it. So the question is of course, experiments are nice, but how can we accelerate it and make it happen?
Yeah.
And basically, it's about creating a perfect storm. So that you force the very big things to change, and that's inspiration. And so showing people that it is possible. It's about like these challenges that the youth is taking over. They don't accept old solutions anymore, and they require change from their politicians. Get the citizens and the consumers with that. So agriculture, I think it changed in the Netherlands that the countryside is from everyone and not just from the farmer. So they have to provide multiple services, and then once you start, okay, we are supporting the farmers, then you can get this acceleration going. That's at least my experience. I don't if it will work everywhere, but that's what at least it's working in the Netherlands.
Yeah, thank you. And what are your ideas about how technology can be stimulated to do these things that are already taken up and being inspired by students and youngsters?
Yeah, well, I'm preaching indeed to the same public. So this technology has been forcing how agriculture should work. But if we then indeed start designing technology for systems that can be, rather than having, now they have a solution and then looking for a problem, you might say, and that's turned that around. So we want to have very diverse systems, and what kind of technology do we need then? And then, yeah, my experience, students like here are crucial to get inspired for new things, and they don't carry the weight that we do.
Exactly. Yeah, I fully agree.
Okay, there's one more question from Safira from Indonesia. Are you still here, Safira?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you have a very interesting question. You want to join the challenge on nature-based solutions, but your question is how waste management can be connected to biodiversity. Do you have an answer to that? It's
definitely. So in nature, there's no waste. And also, if you think about the circular economy, so we have to redefine, of course, what is waste. And a lot of current waste that... Mute Mazur, because so if you think about waste management, I'm not sure if it's about solid waste or urban waste, but if you think about urban waste, there's a lot of organic materials in it with very valuable resources in it. So you can use it to make energy out of it by use of bacteria, or you can use it even to, there's some people now working with urban waste and solar panels, and together they can create proteins. So bacteria are fed with the electricity and the urban waste, and they make proteins that you can eat. You make a protein shake of it. So I would indeed look into, okay, how is nature dealing with waste or with residues, you might say, and then it's a lot about recycling on the proper way, in smart ways.
okay, I hope this is helpful, Safira.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. In the meantime, if you have one last question, then please put it in the chat, and otherwise we will end this session. I see a thank you from Safira, and well, I want to thank all participants and Dirk once more, and have a good conference still for the coming weekend.
Yeah, you all.
Thank you, Pradina, for being our host.
Thank you, Mirjan. Thank you, Apeldoorn. So we will move to the next session. We will have a break for 30 minutes. So yeah, we will be back in 30 minutes again. Thank you.
Yeah, please be back at 30 minutes. But if you're interested with European Commission talk, please join this Zoom link below. Yeah, so we have an overlapping meeting. So yeah, if you're more interested in the other meeting, you can join the Zoom at the chat box. Thank you.
Radina, can you share the screen with us? So that we, yeah, perfect. Oh, this is the last slide. You see the presentation? Radina?
Yes.
All right, all good. Then we have a microphone here. Want to use it?
Yeah, I don't know how this works, but happy to use it.
Test. I think you have to put it behind your
Okay.
You can.
Yeah. So it's just like this, or should it be like
behind your there, and then the microphone is now here.
Okay. I don't know if this is staying well though.
Yeah, this will. Yeah, this is supposed to. This one. All right. We want to use the pointer.
Maybe.
Yes. I don't know where the other part is. Computer. I will. Yeah, we can start. I will try to yeah, get it fixed during the presentation. All right, everyone. We'll move on to the next presentation of the day. And we have seed industry this morning, and now we will move on to a think tank on agriculture, CGIAR. The stage is yours. We are joining here real live.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation, Thomas. And I'm happy to talk again to a live audience finally after so much time. So I am Andrea Nowak, and I work for one of the CGIAR institutes, which is called the Alliance of Biodiversity in CGIAR, based in Rome. I'm going to talk a bit about the organization a few slides later. I focus on the science policy interface. My work is, with my work, I try to enhance or bridge the gap between what scientists say and what policymakers do. And I specifically focus on climate change adaptation, how we measure it, how we evaluate, and how we report it at different levels, at the farm level, at the regional level, at the national level. And yeah, the reason why I'm here to talk about this, about how to best connect scientists with policies, and kind of building a bit on the session, on the previous session, is because there are so many challenges left to solve today, and new ones are emerging as we speak. And part of the reason why challenges persist is not because we don't have enough evidence that they're happening, or we don't have enough ideas about how to solve them, but it's because we don't have sufficient uptake of the evidence that is developed by research institutes, by the academia. There is this disconnect between scientists and policies, and I would also add the on-the-ground, we call them next users, which are like the farmers, the communities, and the rural and urban people as well. So basically, what we're seeing today is that we have some progress on the SDGs. We may have made a lot of progress in solving global poverty, but we're seeing a lot of clusters of poverty regionally, For instance, the number of people living in extreme poverty in sub-Saharan Africa has been on the rise over the past years. We may have solved some food production issues. We may be producing more food these days, but we're not talking sufficiently about nutrition, for instance. The number of children with stunting is declining in all regions except for Africa. So we're not sufficiently looking at the whole picture, for instance, treating food security from an access perspective, from a nutrition perspective. But there's also these regional divides. If we look at SDG, at climate action, SDG number 13, we also see a rising methane emissions trend, mostly from agricultural production. 25 to 30% of the total GHG emissions are attributable to food systems activities, most of these through agricultural production. We're not faring better with the SDG number 15, which is life on land, where we see that we haven't improved the increasing tree cover since the 2000s. 80% of the deforestation worldwide is driven by agriculture. And if we look at the climate aspect, we're seeing that all these challenges that we're facing today are going to be, or are already being exacerbated by climate change and variability. And worldwide, the number of extreme climate events is increasing at an alarming rate. And this is what the graphic on the left is showing. And these climate extremes are linked with poverty. So there is evidence that the areas of extreme climate vulnerability, which are shown on the first map, are linked with the areas with populations suffering from multidimensional poverty in these regions, which is like the map below. And just one note on the map, on the first map, what you're basically seeing is those areas all are areas impacted by climate hazards to some extent. The yellow ones are ones with high climate variability. The light orange ones are where you have growing season reduction. The darker orange ones are areas with high temperatures during the growing season, and the red ones are a combination of two or more climate hazards. So we're seeing that these areas are basically impacted by different extents by climate change and variability. And it's not just economic poverty that is being affected, or like the economic status of the population is being affected. Also, as I was speaking earlier, the nutrition of the population is at risk. Estimates say that more than 175 million people are at risk of zinc deficiencies, and 122 million people with protein deficiency due to high concentration of CO2 by 2050. Climate change is also creating displacement, and another 200 million people are expected to be displaced due to climate change by 2050.
We have some problems, technical problems, so I have to check because they're seeing only. Let me see.
Let me share the screen.
Yeah. Let me see. Can you see it now? Online, Radina? A different slide?
Presenter view. It's still showing the presenter view and not slideshow. Not in slideshow.
Okay. Next one. You see it now?
It's still presenter view.
Let's see, maybe. But you see then another slide, but you only see it in presenter view, right? But it's not that you only see the first slide.
We see slide 6 right now in the next slide in the presenter view.
Share the window. Let me see, new share. Do you know how to fix it? Please come.
Yeah. Yeah, something.
Yeah, sometimes it does that on Zoom. So instead of going from a little icon at the bottom to the page, go to the slideshow tab right at the top of your PowerPoint and click on slideshow from there.
Ah, yeah.
Because Zoom does that.
Let me
So
see.
slideshow. No, you can first go to the slideshow.
But I first have to share my screen, no?
I think after.
Just first go to the slideshow tab at the top, yeah. And then go to from current slide, and then you can share the screen because sometimes it does not soon. I will do this.
No, I told you what to do.
Now you can share it.
But I don't have Zoom anymore now. Here. I have Zoom. Let me see. Is it now working?
Not yet. It's still in the view.
If we share it from this, maybe, but we have two screens here.
You can, yeah.
So if we share it here,
Or maybe share direct from the PowerPoint.
let's see. You can see it now?
Not yet, but I guess if it's not working, then probably it's okay.
I see. I will,
It's still
but you see it in presenter view, right? So you still see the slides.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, then I think we can go on like this.
I apologize. Yeah, and we can send you the slides.
Maybe you could try to share the screen where it has the PowerPoint. If you exit the link, because you see.
Yeah, you can come downstairs. I don't know what you mean. I think we're not seeing the same thing.
It might work because I know that it's the same PowerPoint that we were having sometimes at university. Yeah, so.
I hope it works. So you could share like this screen
Yeah.
and then you go to.
Does it work now? Radina?
Is it working now?
Yep. But it's not in slideshow.
So crazy.
It's on 6th slide, right?
Yeah. Slide 6, but you see then only the presenter view now. Maybe if you mirror the screen. Yeah. I think what we can do is display settings.
Because there's
If you-
three
I know,
presentations
I
open.
think I know what to do. If we say this one off, you want to use presenter view?
It's not responding. Because there's two of them open.
Yeah, not really. I think this is the main one.
Okay, so maybe this one. So this one is it touch? Okay, do you see the mouse? Yeah, cancel. Okay, so it's the second one. So it's, yeah, it's closed now. So so this one, slideshow. It's it's not closing. It's because it's resumed. Yeah, sorry. Let's try from the beginning.
You see it now?
Yeah.
This is perfect.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Now we can continue. Great.
Okay, so just like to kind of like finalize my thought about the idea of having enough evidence and not having enough, action from the policy side. What this matrix tells you is the difference between the intent, need, scope, and the readiness of countries to include climate change adaptation in their agricultural sectors. And you have, I think, two areas of interest on this matrix. Before that, I'll just explain what each, what the X and the Y column axis tell you. So the Y-axis tells you about the readiness for adaptation of countries, and this is based on the Notre Dame Adaptation Index, which is an index based on different economic governance and social variables. So it tells you how ready countries are to adapt. And on the X-axis, you have the scope for adaptation, which is a function of cereal yield gap expressed in percentages and available land. So you also have other details that maybe are not that easy to see, but we can share the presentation afterwards, are basically the need for adaptation, which are the different colors of the forms there, of the icons, which is based on food production deficit and climate impacts. And then the form of the icons is expressing the intent for adaptation. So if countries include climate adaptation actions in their policies, specifically in nationally determined contributions. So what you're largely seeing is like two key things. On the one hand, on the left upper side, you can see that most of those countries concentrated in their area are belonging to developed countries. They have a high scope for adaptation, so they still have arable area available and have low yield gaps, but they have high readiness to adapt. And on the lower side of the matrix, you have a concentration of developing countries, especially from Africa, that have high need to adapt. They have high scope for adaptation, meaning that they have a large yield gap, but they have low readiness levels. So what this tells you is that you still have a lot of needs, but not enough action on the ground. And we have the evidence that this is happening. And so, yeah, the question now is, what is the role of science then? And we are basically advocating that the role of the scientist needs to fundamentally change and to respond to these emerging challenges. And it needs to change not because not on like the content of the research, but mostly in the type, in the how the research is designed, how it is undertaken, and how it is communicating. So a little bit like changing the perspective of science. Maybe this is just like Bruce from Bruce Almighty. So kind of like changing the perspective of how you look at the world. And I don't know how to minimize this, but yeah, so you're not going to be able to see the titles. Yeah, okay. So now you can see the titles as well. And I'm going to tell you a bit about the role of the science in this, and how we, or the role of scientists and how we develop the evidence by giving you some concrete examples from the CGIAR, which is the world's largest publicly funded agriculture research network. and we've been operating for half a decade now. Last year, we celebrated 50 years of agricultural research for development. We have a global presence on 4 continents and local presence in over 100 countries. We're working mostly with partners. We have a network of 3,000 plus partners, and our area is like largely summarized into 4 main components. So we're working on the policy and institutional enabling environment side, and we're working on technology development on and off farm, so not just on-farm practices, but also climate information services. We work on capacity building and strengthening and scaling successful stories, both vertically, so kind of having impact from the community to the national and global level, but also horizontal scaling, trying to reach more and more rural communities. And since the 70s, our mission has changed, I would say drastically, from the overall goal to reduce global hunger. We've transitioned to a more sophisticated focus that targets climate adaptation and mitigation, environmental health, gender equality and social inclusion, nutrition and health and food security, and poverty reduction and livelihoods and jobs. And here you have an overview of how we actually work and how CGIAR is organized. It's organized into main research centers. And one of them was mentioned previously by Anja, which is IFPRI based in DC, but we also have many other research centers that focus on water, on rice, on fish, on climate change. That are spread across the world. We also work through research programs that help again to deliver on the mission, research support platforms that are basically cross-cutting, dealing with cross-cutting issues like climate change, nutrition, water and land. And we also work with through global integrating programs such as Big Data Platform, Gene Bank Platform, and Gender Platform, among others. So I told you that last year we celebrated 50 years of CGIAR, and here is just an example of main achievements, and I put them here so that you can have an idea of what kind of, or how we're working towards reducing that science policy gap, but also to work towards the sustainable development goals. So just a few examples. We've been developing a lot of climate change scenario planning tool, participatory and model-based to inform food and ag policies in more than 30 countries. We've refined the IPCC 2006 guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories, and it was actually the first time that the emissions factors from African livestock farms were included in this in the inventories. We're informing the EU biofuel mandate through informed estimates of effects of indirect land use change. We've been working on the global tree knowledge platform that helps to guide tree planting and survival through databases, maps, and software packages. We've been working also a lot on soil saving techniques like cover crops, no tillage, mulching that benefited more than 500 million smallholder farmers, developing high yielding and drought resistant sweet potato varieties that helped address nutrient deficiencies in the population. And another one, maybe like a really relevant one, the index-based livestock inferences that cover now thousands of Kenyan farmers and have paid out more than 10 million USD in claims. So basically trying to reduce the risks of smallholder agricultural production. If you want to see more of these achievements, you can you're invited to follow this link. And what's the let's say a lot of people think, and with a good let's say, with in their own right, think that research does not have a significant role in change and transformation because it's slow to produce, it's hidden behind paywalls, it doesn't have the right incentive structure. So scientists usually want to produce publication and are misaligned with development challenges. And we're here to basically debunk a bit that myth. And one of our funding partners once said that science has in many ways failed to create change. So often putting data in front of people does not create change. And we believe that this is true. We need more than producing the evidence. We need all sorts of different processes to get that evidence out. And I'm going to talk to you about 4 main lessons. And one of them, from our experience of working in this space, is that mixing the ingredients and mixing the different types of focuses and how you produce science is really important. And what we've been basically trying to do over the past decade or so is to try this 3-third approach, we call it. So the research effort is divided into producing the evidence, credible evidence, engaging with the partners to take up the evidence, but also to develop it, co-develop it, and then outreach through capacity building and training. And one exemplary initiative that has been going on for a few decades now is the climate smart villages and valleys, also known as CSVs, that were born from the idea of scaling climate smart agriculture. And for those of you who are not familiar with this buzzword, it's basically an approach that is mindful of different types of objectives, not just productivity and food security, but looking at adaptation and resilience goals, and also mitigation where it's possible. So basically, these climate smart villages were born from the idea of scaling this approach, but also from the need to kind of show that this is possible, that you can have these objectives, you can meet them on the ground. And so how does a climate smart village, how is it set up? So you first assess the baseline, you assess the climate risks, the vulnerabilities, the resources, the access to market, the local knowledge. You identify the goals together with the community, and you identify the technologies and services that are available. So you create the baseline for your work. Then the design of the CSV is about developing with the community a portfolio of site-specific solutions. It's not just like practices like conservation agriculture or cover crops or water management strategies, but also services that can support the uptake of those practices like climate and weather services. And the third step is about creating the evidence, collecting the data necessary to monitor those sites, to monitor their impact, but also to enable replication of the model to sites with specific with similar conditions. And the ultimate, I would say, one of the ultimate objectives is to scale these both, as I said, like horizontally from farmer to farmer to reach more rural communities, but also scaling up to institutions and to creating like institutions and favorable finance mechanism. And these are all underpinned by a complex process of monitoring and evaluation and learning. And there are 4 key pieces that underpin these climate smart villages approach. One is that it presents an integrated perspective. So we're talking about meeting these different goals of productivity, of food security, of adaptation, and of mitigation. So this is like one way of mixing the ingredients. The second one is the integrated support. So farmers are not just involved in the co-design of the technologies of learning how to adopt them, but also receive capacity building and getting organized into farmer cooperatives to add value to the products, to sell it, and so on. And systemic, we're building links with the private sector and with the local public policy sector. And the third kind of mix is a mix between the different types of actors. So we're bringing together the scientists to help accompany farmers to implement, to identify and implement those measures. But we're also bringing together local policymakers and like municipalities, councils, and so on, to kind of help them build meaningful local adaptation plans. And the fourth component, which is really, really important, is that climate smart villages are about bundles of context-specific solutions. So we recognize that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to all the rural communities. And there is a mix between what you can do on the ground, like the soil level work you can do, but also the enabling environment, like enabling policies and services. And initially, or let's say like to our knowledge, and under kind of like our supervision, there are 36 sites in 20 countries, but these have been scaled by partners by now. And I think there are hundreds of them right now across the world. And here you can I just put some photos so that you can see like the types of work that is being done in these climate smart villages. Some are working on, for instance, air pollution, trying to reduce or to change practices of rice residues burning. Others in Africa and Latin America are working on community seed banks, kind of like trying to save native seeds. Others are working on digital services to provide climate information, but also to monitor the implementation of those practices on the sites. Others have been focusing on developing solar-based irrigation systems, or even using, as I said, like information communication technology for farming. The second piece, after mixing ingredients, is always focused upon about delivering salient and useful. This is basically about, as I said at the beginning, it's not just about delivering information, but information that is usable and designing it through inclusive research processes. And we believe that policymakers right now are kind of are stuck with the big dilemma, are stuck between being lost without information. There's a lot of cases where there's insufficient information of poor quality, which leads, for instance, to bad policies or like no policies at all, but are also lost in information. There's lots of valuable data, a lot of scientific publication hidden behind paywalls, and it's inadequately packaged. They're highly technical language that policymakers cannot really use. So the solution is providing them adequate information to help them create better decisions. And one such example has been a tool that we've worked on, and it's called Evidence for Resilient Agriculture. It is a web-based tool that brings together evidence on the effect of farm management practices on productivity, adaptation, and mitigation indicators such as yields, costs, income, labor, soil quality, water use efficiency, biodiversity, carbon stocks, and so forth. And this is all based on a meta-analysis of more than 2,000 peer-reviewed studies It includes hundreds of thousands of observations on more than 300 practices and combinations, more than 200 crop and livestock and tree products, and over 70 types of outcomes. So the idea of this initiative was to basically try and collect and compile all the evidence that is out there, initially in the African context, to bring them into the hands of policymakers, of investors that are looking for quick insights, for actionable insights. They don't have time to go through thousands of publications to find the evidence. So we've been focusing on very different case studies. So the data is kind of the type of insights provided are malleable for different audiences. We're looking at investment design because there's a lot of data. I mean, there's data on costs of technologies and practices, at policy formulation, because it provides insights on social, environmental, and economic data to identify scalable solutions. We're looking at research prioritization. Based on the results from the meta-analysis, we can clearly see what areas are actually under-researched, areas and also crops. So we're promoting better research prioritization and, of course, helping development partners to better plan their projects based on best available evidence. Another initiative that is just kicking is kind of linked to the previous one, because we use information from the evidence for resilient agriculture to inform some of the developments of this tool, which is called the Adaptation Atlas. It is still being in development. We're working on the minimum viable product right now, but essentially it is a decision support tool that offers spatial explicit data on the nature and patterns of climate hazards, the exposure of smallholder farms and agricultural enterprises, on the adaptive capacity of those populations, and evidence of the efficacy of climate adaptation solutions. So we're kind of trying to walk investors and policymakers through the process of identifying what's happening with specific regions in terms of climate impacts, what are their ability to adapt, and what kind of solutions would fit those contexts. So this is kind of like the logical flow. And there's a lot of data sets behind this tool. We're talking about different climate hazards included, different exposure indicators like harvested area, production, quantity and value, yield, quantity and value, adaptive capacity such as nutrition, education, extreme poverty, and market access, and different types of solutions. So we're looking at land and soil, at water, at diversification, water management, and we're also looking at how we could potentially by looking at services, for instance. So this is a work in progress, but this is an example of work that we've been doing, has been highly driven by stakeholders. We've been designing it with our development partners. Just some examples, we've been working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is a BMGF fund. Basically, this was initially to inform their agricultural development strategy, but this has grown into a much bigger initiative that is hoping to inform policies of the Green Climate Fund, of the GIZ, maybe of different developing partners and even research institutes. The third kind of like message is leaving no one behind, and the importance of empowering vulnerable communities, but especially younger generations, to have a bigger voice in the transformation of the food and agricultural sector. And I'm going to be focusing on youth because we are at a youth and agricultural conference. But there's a lot of valuable also work on gender and social inclusion, on work with vulnerable communities that you can check on our website. But yeah, we've been focusing, or colleagues have been focusing on promoting opportunities for rural employment among youth in Africa, because the average farmer's age across Africa is around 60 years, and youth represents like the highest, most representative population category. So there's a huge opportunity to focus the work in there. So colleagues have been running a program that is called Youth in Agribusiness, and provides capacity building and incubation for young people that want to stay in the agriculture sector, like need the incentives and need the education to do so. And the model has been implemented and so far in 20 countries across Africa, has trained more than 7,000 youths and supported hundreds of agribusinesses, providing jobs for young people. And just to finish, because I want to have the space for discussion, is the importance of assessing the impact. And I know that this has also been mentioned in the previous discussion. Yes, you're talking about these benefits, but are you actually measuring them? Like, is there evidence that you're achieving what you're saying? Our focus is, I would say, split into two main pillars. We're trying to monitor and assess results of our own projects and our own interventions through impact assessments, through adoption studies, outcome harvests, and synthesis evaluations. And at the end of the presentation, I've provided some links. If you're interested in methodologies of looking at these, you're more than welcome to explore. But the second pillar, which is equally important, is supporting other institutions to measure and evaluate their contribution to climate change adaptation and mitigation. So just a few examples, there's an index for measuring women empowerment in ag, which has been recently developed. We have long lists of climate smart agriculture indicators, like what kind of indicators are fit for what different, like for different levels of decision making, depending on the objective that you're seeking, and also climate change adaptation indicators at national level. We've been synthesizing what countries have been, how they have been measuring adaptation to climate change, and how they enhance them in the future. And the reason why we're doing these things is because this helps us better tell our story, but also helps a lot in learning, in assessing what we're doing in adaptive management and learning. And this is just one example from the first pillar I mentioned. The types of insights that you can get from, for instance, an impact assessment. And this is an example from the measuring welfare impacts of participatory integrated climate services for agriculture in Rwanda, where we observed a 24% increase in value of crop production and 30% increase in income. So this is only looking at the welfare, but there's also kind of like components of adoption. For instance, these participation in these trainings and adoption of climate services has led to like farmers keeping them. 58% of the farmers who used them decided on the crop varieties. So kind of like these had an impact on their day-to-day decision. And 75% decided to change the timing of planting and land preparation, or how to prepare the land. So this is just like a very quick and dirty example of what kind of insights you can get with this. And I stop here because I want to hear more from you, and I'm particularly interested in hearing more of how what kind of support youth need in order to get to this, to maybe not just like to get into the ag sector per se and to go to farming, but also like to get engaged into these processes and have more voice, maybe at the policy level, maybe at the scientific level. And yeah, thanks.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. It was amazing. My question is not really based on news, but policy. Policy makers are mostly politicians. And of course, politicians always have their priority number one as getting the impact to the people so that their blessing can be felt. On the other side, science is known to be time-consuming to implement the results and recommendations. So, do you think this divergent point of view would be the reason why there exists a very big gap between science and policy? And what do you think can be done to bridge this gap? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very glad you're mentioning. I'm going to take it right away because I have the answer right away. I'm very glad you asked this because there's so much more that we could talk about apart from these 4 big picture lessons. I think yes, I think part of why this gap exists is because these 2 groups work towards very different objectives. And this is what I mentioned, like misaligned agendas. And what we've been trying to do was, I would just mention like 2 key things here. One is try to always work with the technical people from the ministries, from the local government. So those people that would understand like a bit the technicalities, but would also understand the needs from the community, but would also have the link to the policy, especially because I mean governments are 4 or 5 years mandate. So after 4 or 5 years, I mean, a research project can take 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. So after you finish the research project, in the meantime, the government would have changed. So we're kind of like trying to address this issue by really working with the people that have a mandate behind beyond that government mandate. And the second piece has been also kind of like bringing that. Developing that scientific credibility and reliability. So kind of the scientists kind of have to be always there when they're asked for information, for support. So for instance, sometimes governments are developing proposals for Green Climate Fund, and these are like very extensive processes, but sometimes you're last minute and you need to provide the evidence quickly in order to write that concept note. So if somebody comes and asks it from a ministry, you kind of like have to be there and leave like everything you had aside and dedicate yourself to the things that are kind of most pressing, the things that the next user needs, because this helps you develop a credibility and certain relationship with your partners. I hope that answered your question, but I'm happy to expand it more. Okay.
I'm first like to get answer the question and ask like how would use voices we heard in this instance, and then I have some question. So I think it could be done by more capacity building, because a lot of the times youth don't know what resources are available to them and how they could use it. So I think capacity building is a great way to fix this problem, and also employing a participatory approach, not only policy but also decision making. And this would not be focused again much only on the youth but on the farmers in general, because a lot of times when policymakers make decisions, it's like all them. And the farmers just have to use whatever policies are given to them. And in most cases, they're not very favorable to the farmers. However, if you encourage a participatory approach where the farmers feel like they are part of the decision-making process, you're able to really see what challenges they are facing, not just what you've found during your meta research, but actual things that are happening on the ground. That way it helps to address specific problems and also to give farmers a sense of ownership. Because in most cases, farmers' behavior doesn't change because they feel that they're not part of the project. It's just something that's been done to farm them. So there's not that willingness to adapt to certain changes. And my question now is that, are you doing any work in Zimbabwe? The reason I ask is that's my country, and I know that there's a lot of issues that we're facing as a country, especially like the climate hazards and stuff like that. And even my thesis is based on something similar where I'm looking at agricultural programs that are affecting food security and sustainability in Zimbabwe. So I'm actually looking, one of the specific objectives is to see the relationship between climate smart agricultural practices and food security. So yeah, that's my question. Are you doing anything about it?
Okay, so I'll start with your question. And yes, we're doing work in Zimbabwe. I've been personally engaged in one initiative that was looking at more at the national policy level and trying to see how climate smart agriculture is basically mainstreamed as an approach in policies, but also how it's being measured on the ground. So what kind of monitoring and evaluation systems are there? I know there's work from colleagues focused on more of the breeding side and also like an adoption of practices on the ground. And I would kind of invite you to check the website for more information. And also the tool I mentioned, Evidence for Resilient Agriculture, also synthesizes work from like evidence from Zimbabwe that if you're interested, drop me an email and we can totally chat some more about your relevant resources for your work. And then on the first piece, I agree with all the comments you made on why youth, like engaging youth, but also farmers in the process is important. And what we've seen is that it not just allows us to respond to their challenges and to have like meaningful impact in their communities, but it also helps to maintain adoption of these behaviors over time. Because if there isn't any ownership, like if the farmers don't feel empowered to do this by themselves, they will not, as soon as we leave the site, they will continue to do what they were doing before.
And then it also raises the sustainability aspect, because in most cases, these projects are not sustainable because the farmers are not directly involved.
Exactly, yeah. And I think this is one of the big lessons that we've learned also within the CG along the years, when we were focused mostly like at the beginning, like in the times of the Green Revolution, trying to develop improved varieties and try to work from a lag perspective. With now like really doing, we cannot imagine our work without working with the communities and with the other stakeholders.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. So just to answer the question towards you, I think one of the things I'd like to have from building a big organization research is the change of narrative, especially towards Africa. So the thing is, the research organization spend time talking about China. Spend time making the future very good. You don't tell us much about opportunities. You know, that's literally the same story telling us that there's a lot of malnutrition in Africa. You know, that's the good side. But if you say we need more produce of food in Africa, it's literally the same story. But one is telling me that there's an opportunity to produce more food and to save life. The other one is telling me that people are dying. So if maybe I heard less than people are dying, then the fact that I could be a solution that could, you know, just motivate me to act, not get me in a silent state. You know? So that brings to my question. So between the developed food system and the underdeveloped food system, which one is the most ready to adapt to a sustainable, to sustainable practices? In other words, between big farm and small one, which one is easier to transition to sustainable practices?
Yeah, this is a very nice reflection. And again, I'm happy that you brought this up. The reason why I started with the challenges is because I see them as opportunities. So all these problems that were mentioned are opportunities for scientists to actually like work on and kind of like reassess. And I'm glad that you kind of put it into better words, how you need to look at from the other side, from the solutions perspective. And I think that there's, can you remind me like the developed food system? I don't know if I talked about developed and developing food systems. I tried to be like a bit neutral. I mean, we think that we need to transform the way we're producing the food, and this is actually like worldwide. It's not just about, and this is not just about the food production, but it's also about changing the diets. It's about working through the value chain. It's about changing how you actually manage the harvest, transport the harvest, what you consume as an urban dweller. And it also needs to change at the policy and institutional level. So I don't know if I can tell you like this developing. I would think that you're talking about developing contexts and developed contexts, and which is more ready to adapt, right?
So it's somehow linked to you showed the graph.
Yeah.
That was a equation.
Yeah.
That's one. Yes. So the bottom line here was that developed countries are easier to transition to a sustainable world or food system than underdeveloped countries. So I don't know, but before you let us grow, and if we have to look at models of a farmer in the developed country and in the underdeveloped country, the one in the developed country has invested a lot of capital in farm. And when you buy a tractor that costs you more than $100,000, it's going to take you, let's say, 10, 15 years for you to pay all that's debt. And you have to wait for that time for you to change systems. Well, if you look at a model of a farmer in a developed country, he hasn't invested much, and he could adapt in circumstances, just to teach the right things. So when I see that graph, I'm still wondering if the reality is not there, or it's just that we don't know that there's an opportunity to change and to do better. That's why we don't do it. But not that we can't do it, because it's simple. If we spoke about biomass in terms of grass, I saw farms here relocated. The grass is 20 centimeters high. I see farms in my country, the grass is 2 meters high. Who's able to go by the farming best? So how would you tell me that I'm less likely to transition to sustainable practices than a farming? Yeah, that's somehow controversial.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think I mean, this tells you part of the story, and it's all about how you measure, right? Things like, how do you measure the capacity to adapt, right? You can look at through it through an educational point of view, through a resources point of view, through a cultural point of view, through an ethical point of view. Here is really talking about the institutional setup, the organizational farmers being organized into cooperatives, about economic opportunities. But I totally agree with you that this is only telling you a piece of the story. It doesn't tell you, however, that they have zero capacity to adapt. So if you're seeing the axis start from like 30%, but in any case, I think it's really important to question all these kind of evidences that are coming out, and to look at like what's behind this, like what are the indicators behind these? Are they looking at indicators that are meaningful to my community or to my country? So that's I guess the whole point of this graphic is to really like give you a perspective of the incoherence between the need and like the readiness or to adapt, big picture. I think if you want to take action on the ground, you need to go to the farm, to the local level, to really understand what's happening there.
So lastly, sorry, what are the opportunities for small-scale farmers to adapt to sustainable systems? The opportunities for small-scale farmers to adapt to sustainable food systems.
You're asking me this question, okay? Yeah, I think we can stay until tomorrow to talk about opportunities, and I think there's so much out there talking about these, but I think again depends on the context, right? But I think, as I mentioned, the youth and the fact that youth is more able to use technology, for instance, and has more access to technology to access information, but also to use that information in order to take decisions. So I mentioned a lot the climate information, weather services. So it's basically trying to provide farmers with the weather and climate alerts on a regular basis. So we've been working a lot with youth to do so, because they not only have the capacity to manage technology, but also to multiply this capacity, so to multiply this knowledge to other communities. Yeah, I know this is like a very short answer and it's a very superficial, but I think this is I think one of the key takeaways that I would like to provide.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have to go for lunch. Lunch is waiting outside of this building. But thank you so much, Anja, for your presentation. And I would also like to invite you to join us for lunch. It's waiting outside. And yeah, you can ask some questions there and the Zoom. There's some sunshine. I think it's a good idea. Everyone here will go to 2 farms today. And we will first have lunch, and then I will discuss how to move further from there. Make sure you bring everything with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining. And if you have questions or if you want to get in touch, please feel free to use my email address. Thanks.
Stop share here.
Maybe there were questions.
Yeah, there was.
What are we doing? Maybe can we copy them and maybe I can follow up, because I think.
Yeah, there was one question here from German about.
Yeah, maybe do you have contacts of these persons?
Yeah, I think German can still hear us. So German, if you can share your contact information in the chat, they can keep in touch with you.
Yeah, maybe if you can, the ones who asked questions in the chat, maybe if you can leave your contacts there, I would be very interested in following up with you. And
Yeah. And for Pradina, we will leave the meeting now, so if you can collect those information, and then I can let Andrea know later.
Sure, yeah.
All right. Have a good day, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Okay. So we will be having, yes, training committee will happily invite you to participate in soft skill training, which is start in around 2.5 hours, but make sure to register first at the link that provided in the chat box in case you haven't seen it. Yeah, it's right there. Please to register to make it to the training session from YES training committee. It will be held at around 2.5 hours at 14 GMT +1. So make sure to register. We'll be waiting for you. To register, the link for Zoom will be sent. So, sure, yeah. You're welcome. Make sure to register.
You say that one when you are.
Excuse me? So yeah, for now, you can leave the meeting and the training session will be held at around 14 GMT +1. So yeah, make sure to register. And thank you for joining the schedule for today.